guys, so I'm here to do my end of September reading wrap up. I'm going to give you mini reviews of all of the books that I read in the month of September, so if you're interested, stay tuned. I read a lot of goodies this month, so I'm excited to tell you all about them. We'll start from the books I read at the beginning and work our way forward. So the first book I finished in the month of September was Animal by Sarah Pascoe. Now, although I don't think this was a bad book, I still enjoyed it and got a lot from different bits of it. This book unfortunately did not live up to my expectations. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think it was a real mixed bag. It's basically inspired by Sarah Pascoe's interest in different kind of evolutionary theories about gender. And she's taken that interest in interesting things she's found out in reading casually and kind of explored them in tandem with modern phenomenon. Now, this does not always work, to be perfectly honest. I don't want to just sit here and criticise the book because I think there's a lot of great stuff, and the book especially ended on, I think, a really great note, and by the end I was like, I am actually quite glad I read that, and I think it was a really fun reading experience. I actually listened to an audiobook and Sarah Pascoe read the audiobook, and I think she did a fantastic job. I think with non-fiction books like these are written by the author who sometimes talks about their personal experience, they're just fantastic on audiobook. But I did consider giving up near the beginning. She's taken lots of information that she's not an expert on, and some of it's really contentious information and kind of building a discussion on that, which I don't think works out well. I think the discussion is really interesting, and when she's talking about contemporary issues, stuff she's kind of met with being a woman, and ways that society likes to control her body and define her gender, that I really enjoyed. That I thought was great. I think some of the discussion of science and even philosophy, there's some references to Plato which were kind of just off base, that weren't right, and a lot of the science was very oversimplified, and I'm not a scientist, but even I felt a bit like, why am I reading Sarah Pascoe to get this? And I get that it was a bouncing point for her, but I think maybe she needed less of it if that was the case, or she needed to spend more time researching it. And it was all very just generalised and simplified, and I don't think that worked. But like I said, I think the rest of it worked really well, and I really enjoyed listening to her talk about contemporary stuff, and I still think it's a good book, and I'd go into it aware of that so that you're not disappointed and that you can just go into it quite lightly and appreciate it for what it is. The next book I read was a piece of fiction though, and that was Soulless by Gail Carriger, and this is the first in the Parasol Protectorate series. I've been meaning to pick up this series for a while. I hear a lot of people talk about it whose opinions I really trust, like Elizabeth over at Books and Pieces. I think Caitlin's talked about it, Nicole, I think. All of these people will be linked down below because, I mean, I love all of their channels, and they eventually drilled it into my head enough that I had to check out Gail Carriger, and I'm really glad I did. This was such a fun, light-hearted book, and it was exactly what I needed. I zoomed through it. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and it's about our protagonist, A1 Ms. Tarabotti, and it's set during the 1800s in London very much as it would have been in the 1800s, but with the addition of werewolves and vampires. Now, I wouldn't consider myself a massive fan of the paranormal genre, but I just thought this was so good. It was so funny, and Ms. Tarabotti was such a fantastic character, and there was lots to get behind. I think it reminded me a little bit of a historical version of the Sookie Stackhouse books, but better. I enjoyed reading the Sookie Stackhouse books. They were just consumable junk that I really needed at the time and really enjoyed. I think the Parasol Protectorate series is definitely a level above of literature, but it's still not literary fiction, but it's still very witty and clever and good fun, and I think if you're just looking for something like that, I would highly, highly recommend this. The one thing I will say is the Scottish dialect that they gave one of the main characters is off a little bit off. Clearly not written by a Scottish person, but I will forgive it that because, like I said, such a fun reading experience. Would highly recommend. It's a bit of a mystery as well. The main character is kind of trying to figure out what's going on. There's something strange. There are some quite smutty scenes as well. If you're repelled by the idea of that, I thought I should let you know. I'm then actually going to skip to the end of the month because I'm going to talk about my Diversathon reads altogether briefly. But another book that I read was Tony Robinson's Autobiography, No Cunning Plan. I got a copy of this from work because I work at Pan Macmillan, the publishing house that publishes this book. But it was day one in that job and I saw that they were publishing Tony Robinson's autobiography and I was like, I need this book, guys. I need to read this book. And I really enjoyed it. It is a book for Tony Robinson fans. So if you're not familiar, Tony Robinson is an actor and a presenter and a writer, a British actor, presenter and writer. He's been around for quite a few decades. He was in some really popular comedy series like Blackadder, if you've ever seen it. I'm sure if you're from Britain you probably have. He also presented one of my favourite shows when I was younger, which is Time Team, which was a show all about archaeology. They would go on archaeological digs and Tony Robinson would present it, and he made archaeology so fun and accessible, and it's one of the major reasons I got so fascinated by archaeology and ancient history and ended up reading more and learning more about it before ending up going to university to initially do a archaeology degree, which, I mean, I do feel like Tony Robinson was the instigator of. And I also loved all of his comedy things when I was a kid, like Maid Marian. I don't want this video to turn into a Tony Robinson gush, however, though, but I will say, between the ages of about 7 and 17, whenever anybody asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? Who do you want to be like when you grow up? Who's your hero? My answer was, I want to be Tony Robinson. Anyway, I read his autobiography. Naturally, I enjoyed it. I am a big fan. This book was so much fun. Like I said, if you're a fan of Tony Robinson, I think you'll enjoy it. There's so much I didn't know about him and his work, obviously prior to when I was even alive, that he's done on stage and on screen and directing even, and it was so interesting to learn about his journey. He's just done some really fascinating, interesting and varied stuff, some of which I already knew about and had followed, and a whole other breadth of stuff that I didn't, and I loved reading about it. Naturally, because I enjoyed the autobiography and his work so much, I had to make a book break video about No Cunning Plan, which is the series I create for Pan Macmillan on their YouTube channel, and I even, wait for it, got to interview the man himself. So if you want to know more about the book and want to see my interview with the author, then I will have that linked down below because it was a big moment for me and I'm really proud of that video. The next 4 books I read were all for the Diversathon, which was a readathon that was run this month, and I've done a separate wrap up for that. So I'll link that down below so you can hear more about the books, and I'll just briefly tell you what 3 of them are and go into more detail about the 4th, because the 4th one I hadn't finished when I did the wrap up. So the 3 that I talked about in the wrap up were I Am Malala, which I have a whole video dedicated to that book. It's amazing. I can say no more, just read it. Sultana's Dream, which is actually just a short story from the early 1900s, and it's one of the earliest like feminist utopians, and it was a really fascinating read, although very, very short. And thirdly, Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay, which is a non-fiction collection of essays. And again, a book that actually really surpassed my expectations and that I really enjoyed reading. So you can hear more about those in my wrap-up. But the last one was Boy Snow Bird, which I briefly talked about in my wrap-up, and that's by Helen Oyeyemi, and this is a fiction book. And I don't know how to rate this because up until about 93% it was a 5-star book, and then there was a weird thing that happened at the end which made me a little bit uncomfortable on how to rate it. But I'd probably still recommend it to most people. It was my first Helen Oyeyemi, and I think it's so beautifully written. Her writing is stunning. It's about a woman who runs away from an abusive home in her late teens, early 20s, to move to a small town, and she marries a man who already has a daughter from a previous marriage of which his wife died, and she then becomes pregnant with his second child. And it isn't until then that she discovers that her husband and his entire family and his original daughter are actually African American, because her baby is born black, whereas everybody else in his family pass for white. And as you can gather from that description, the book itself explores the topic of race, and it's really fascinating. It's really done really well. The characters are all so interesting. None of them are entirely likeable, but they're all really interesting. and they're just people, which is really nice, although they're written about in a really, really elegant way. The book itself is also loosely based on the fairy tale Snow White, and I loved all the references and parallels to Snow White, although it is a novel set entirely in reality. I loved all of that. There was just a thing at the end where it was basically this whole thing came out that you weren't expecting, big plot twist, really good plot twist for something that you don't see coming. But I did feel a little bit like it played onto massive tropes to do with another marginalised group in society. So I don't think that was handled that well. I think it could have been a little bit less tropey, especially given how interestingly it had explored the issues of race. And obviously I can't say any more than that without spoiling it, but I think I would still recommend the book. I was just a little bit shocked at kind of how oversimplified and maybe how many tropes had been used at that end bit. I'd be really interested to hear from you if you've read the book as well, because I need to talk about this, guys. There was so much in that book, and especially in that last little bit. So leave your comments. But I think that's everything I had to talk about in this video. But let me know if you've read anything particularly good this month. If you participated in the Diversathon, I'd love to hear about your reading experience. And if you have any thoughts on the books I mentioned in this video, please do let me know. But until next time, guys, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!